What do you do when you wake up from a coma and hear your own son decide that your wife will be locked in a nursing home the moment you die? How do you stay still, pretend to sleep, and quietly move every piece of your life out of his reach without breaking a single law? This is how I sold everything, crossed a border with my wife, and left my son to discover the truth in a lawyer's office instead of at my bedside. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Martin Alvarez, and when this part of my story begins, everyone in the room thinks I am asleep and maybe already half gone. My body is heavy, my mouth is dry, and the world comes to me in pieces of sound and light. I cannot open my eyes yet. Not fully, but I can hear the slow beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen. I smell disinfectant and something sour under it. I feel the weight of blankets and tubes, and I know I am in a hospital bed, but for a while I do not remember why. Little by little, the fog lifts. I remember a sharp pain in my head, a fall in the kitchen, Elena calling my name and her voice shaking. I remember bright lights in an ambulance, someone saying stroke, someone else saying stay with us. After that, only darkness and the feeling that my body does not belong to me anymore. Now the darkness is thinner. I cannot move much, but I can think. I decide not to let anyone see that yet. I keep my eyelids almost closed and my breathing slow. I pretend to still be deep in the coma they think I am in. There are people in the room with me. I hear shoes on the floor, the rustle of a coat. A man's voice speaks in a calm, careful way. I recognize that tone. It is a doctor explaining bad news in soft words. He says my name and mentions my age. He says I had a moderate stroke, that they did a procedure, and that I responded better than expected. He says recovery is possible, that sometimes patients wake and talk, sometimes they need long rehab, sometimes they stay confused. He does not promise anything, but I can hear there is some hope in his voice. Then I hear my son. David's voice is sharper, faster. He asks about timelines. He wants to know how long I might stay like this, how long before they can say, this is it. He asks about the chances of me walking again, driving again, living a normal life. The doctor answers slowly. He says it is too early to know. He says the brain is strange and sometimes surprises everyone. He says they will know more in a few weeks. David sighs. He says he has a full-time job, a family, and a mortgage. He says he needs to plan. He talks about how his mother, Elena, already has trouble with her joints and sometimes forgets things. He says she cannot handle being my caregiver if I come home like this. He says that would not be safe. He says a lot of words that sound thoughtful, but his voice is cold underneath. The doctor suggests they bring in a social worker to discuss options for rehab and long-term care. He says there are programs, support services, maybe in-home help. David answers that in-home help is too expensive and not realistic. He says people need to be practical. The doctor goes quiet for a moment. Then I hear footsteps and the soft click of the door. Someone leaves. After a while, another pair of shoes comes in. A woman's voice now, clear and professional. She says her name is Karen, and she is the hospital social worker. She speaks kindly. She talks about rehab centers, home care, family meetings. She asks David how he thinks his parents will manage when I leave the ICU. David laughs a little. He says, to be honest, Elena can barely manage herself. He says that if I come home needing help, she will break down. My chest tightens, but I keep breathing slow. I want to open my eyes and tell him he is wrong, but I stay still. I want to hear everything he says when he thinks I am not listening. Karen asks about Elena's health. David says Elena has arthritis, that she moves slow, that she misplaces things and repeats herself. He calls it early memory problems. He says she cries easily and makes everything bigger than it is. He says he and his wife, Rachel, have already talked about what will happen when I go. He uses that word like I am a battery that will run out soon. Karen stays quiet for a moment. Then she asks what he means. David says that once I die, Elena will not be able to live alone. He says they cannot take her in full-time because Rachel has work, the house is busy, Lily has school and activities, and they need space. He says they think a nursing home will be best. He says those places can give her everything she needs. My heart feels like it stops and then starts again. I am not surprised that my son thinks about my death. Everyone thinks about death when a parent is in ICU. But the way he says it, the calm way he plans to send my wife, his own mother, into a facility as soon as I am gone, cuts deeper than any knife. Karen asks gently if he has talked about this with Elena. He says no, because she would get emotional. He says they will present it as a safe option for her, but he does not want her to have too many choices. He jokes that old people are like kids, that if you ask them, they always choose the worst thing. He says sometimes you just have to decide for them. The monitor at my bedside beeps a little faster. I try to calm my breathing so no one notices. Karen suggests family counseling, maybe a meeting with an elder law attorney to understand everyone's rights and wishes. David is not excited about that. He says lawyers make things complicated. He says his parents signed some papers years ago, and he is sure everything will come to him anyway. After a while, I hear another voice. Lighter, younger. It is Rachel. She has come up from the waiting room. She sounds tired and annoyed. She complains about parking, about the cost of food at the cafeteria, about the time this is taking from her work. Then the talk turns back to me and Elena. Rachel says she looked up facilities online. She says some of them look very nice. She talks about bright rooms, activities, nurses on call. She says it would be easier for everyone if both of us ended up in a place like that. She says it would allow her and David to live their lives without guilt. She uses the word guilt like it is something someone handed her, not something she chose. Then she lowers her voice, but I still hear. She says she does not want her home turned into a sick room. She says she worked hard to make it look like the houses she sees on social media, and she does not want oxygen tanks and walkers in the photos. She laughs a little, but there is no humor in it. They talk about money, too. David says keeping 2 elders in a house is more expensive than 1 in a facility and 1 gone. He says it blunt, just like that. 1 gone, like I am a number on a sheet. At some point, they move to the family waiting room. Voices fade, the door closes, and I hear only the machines again. Time passes in waves. Nurses come and go. They adjust tubes, take blood, check charts. Some of them talk over me like I am not there. 1 or 2 speak directly to me, even though they think I cannot hear. They tell me to rest, to keep fighting. I cling to their words like small, warm stones in a cold river. Later that day, David comes back alone. He stands by my bed and sighs. He tells me, in a low voice, that he is doing his best. He says he will have to make hard choices. He says he will take care of things when I am gone. He does not say my name with love. He says it like a task. He mentions that he will talk to a lawyer soon to get control of the situation. He does not think I can hear that either. When he leaves, he drops something on the small table by my bed. I hear the soft slap of paper on plastic. After he is gone, a nurse comes in to check my IV. She straightens the sheet and moves the thing he left so it does not fall. I manage to move my eyes a little. I see a glossy picture in the edge of my vision, just enough to understand. It is a brochure with smiling old people in a bright hallway. A title about extra care for your loved ones is printed in large letters I cannot fully read, but I know exactly what it is. On the wall beside my bed, a small calendar hangs near the chart. A date 2 weeks from now is circled in red. Under it, someone has written, "Family meeting, planned discharge." I lie there between that red circle and the brochure, listening to the beeping of the monitor, and I know one thing with more clarity than anything else. If I do nothing, my wife will be placed in a home like that the moment my heart stops. In the hours after I saw the red circle on the little calendar, my mind kept drifting backward. Lying there, unable to move much, I had nothing but time and memories. I thought about how long Elena and I had been walking this road, and how many times we had chosen David over ourselves. When we were young, we lived in a small, hot apartment above a noisy street. I worked as an electrician during the day and took small repair jobs at night. Elena cleaned offices part-time and took in sewing. We saved every spare coin in an envelope in the top drawer of a second-hand dresser. We used that envelope to pay for David's school trips, his sports, his books. We skipped vacations and new clothes. We always said we would rest later when he was grown and stable. I remembered the day we bought our little house. The walls were dirty, the plumbing was bad, but to us it felt like a palace. Elena cried when she held the keys. I promised her that one day we would sit on that front porch as old people and watch the sunset without worrying about bills. We worked for that promise for decades. I fixed wiring in other people's homes and businesses until my hands cracked. Elena cooked, cleaned, and took care of David, then took a job at a grocery store when he was older so we could pay off the mortgage faster. We did it too. By the time David finished college, the house was ours free and clear. That house became the center of our lives, a place we thought our family would always feel safe. Back then, David looked at us with something like pride. He would say that his friends were amazed he had parents who owned a home outright. He liked telling people that his father could fix anything, that his mother made the best food in the neighborhood. When he got his first office job, he took us out to a modest restaurant and paid the bill himself. He said that one day he would make sure we never had to worry about anything again. We believed him. Parents want to believe words like that. The shift did not happen overnight. It came in small, sharp pieces over years. The first time I really felt it was at a dinner in his new house. after he married Rachel. Their place was bigger and smoother than ours. Everything matched. Cushions, plates, colors. Elena kept saying how beautiful it was. Rachel smiled and said it had been a lot of work. During dinner, David and Rachel told stories about their jobs, their gym, their upcoming vacation. When Elena tried to talk about the neighbor's birthday party or the new plant she was growing, they changed the subject quickly. It was as if our lives were too small to fit at their table. Later, when I asked about some complicated phone app David wanted us to use, he laughed and said old people and technology did not mix. He said it kindly at first, but the joke stuck. After that, every small mistake we made with phones, remotes, or online payments became proof in their eyes that we were falling behind. Rachel began saying to friends that they had 2 extra kids to manage, meaning us. She would say it with a smile, like it was a cute line, but the more she said it, the more I heard the truth under it. She did not see us as the people who raised David. She saw us as delayed teenagers who might break things. As time went on, Elena's body started to hurt more. Her hands swelled, her knees complained. She moved slower, forgot where she put her glasses, told the same small story twice in one evening. To me, she was still my wife, the woman who walked miles to work when buses were on strike, who stayed up late sewing patches on David's clothes so he would look neat at school. To David and Rachel, she became a warning of what they did not want to become. They started using words like decline and burden. They said them when they thought we were not listening. Sometimes they said them when we were. In the rehab ward after my stroke, I watched this new version of my son in full color. The room was bright, the air smelled like rubber from exercise bands and disinfectant. Therapists came in with clipboards and gentle smiles. They helped me sit, helped me stand, helped me take a few steps between metal bars. Each small move felt like climbing a mountain. When I managed to stand for longer than a minute, one therapist smiled and told me I was doing better than expected. I felt a small flare of pride. Then David came in one afternoon while I was working with the therapist. He arrived late, suit still on, phone in his hand. He watched me shuffle from one bar to the other, sweat on my forehead, my legs shaking. The therapist told him that I was making good progress, that my mind was clear and my body was responding. David nodded, but looked more annoyed than relieved. Later, in the hallway, I heard him at the nurse's station telling someone that progress did not change the fact that he could not put his life on hold forever. He said that even a half recovery would still leave me and Elena as heavy responsibilities. Elena came to visit as often as she could, even though the trip tired her. She sat by my bed and rubbed lotion into my hands, talking about small things in a soft voice. She told me about the neighbor's dog, about the new girl at the grocery store, about the weather. Between those small pieces, I heard something else. I heard fear. She told me that David had asked again if she was sure she could manage me at home if I came back with a cane, a wheelchair, or a foggy mind. She said he kept repeating that reality had to be faced. She said she told him that we had taken care of each other for 40 years and that she did not plan to stop now. Then she looked down and admitted that he made her feel small, like a child insisting on something she could not understand. One evening, I was alone in the rehab room when the door opened softly and Lily slipped inside. She was small, with her hair in a messy ponytail and a stuffed animal in her hand. She climbed onto the chair and took my fingers in both of hers. She did not try to be strong. She just looked at me with big, worried eyes. She told me that Mommy had said Grandpa might not come home. She asked if that was true. I could not speak much, but I squeezed her hand and tried to show her with my eyes that I was still in there. Later that same visit, she let something else slip. She said she had heard Mommy and Daddy talking in the kitchen. She said they were saying that when I die, Grandma would go live in that place from the magazine, the one with bingo and nurses and white hallways. She said she had seen the brochure on the table and had asked if that meant Grandma would move away. She told me that Mommy had told her not to worry and that adults would decide. Lily looked down at my blankets and asked if Grandma would be sad there. Something in my chest twisted so hard that for a moment I could not breathe. The heart monitor beside my bed began to beep faster, the sound sharp and high. Lily's eyes widened and she looked at the screen. A nurse rushed in, checked the lines, and asked if everything was okay. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to calm my heartbeat, to keep the real panic inside where no one could see it. The nurse adjusted a setting and told Lily that sometimes machines got excited too. Lily laughed a little, but her grip on my hand was tighter. When the room was quiet again, I realized that the pattern was complete. It was not a misunderstanding or a moment of stress. This was how my son now saw us. 2 old pieces of furniture he would have to move out of his way, one to the ground, one to a facility. All the years of work, all the sacrifices, all the promises were now just background noise to his plans. Lying there, feeling my heart slow down under the nurse's calm hand, I understood that if I waited for that red-circled family meeting and trusted David's sense of duty, I would be signing Elena over to a life in a place she never chose. That was the moment when the sadness inside me turned into something else, something colder and clearer. I did not know how yet, but I knew I would not let him decide the end of our story. The next days in the hospital moved in a strange, slow motion. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and stubborn, but my mind was sharp now in a way it had not been before. I made a choice that would have seemed strange to anyone watching. I decided to stay weaker on the outside than I was on the inside. When nurses came in, I moved just enough to show progress, not enough to show strength. When the doctor asked questions, I answered softly, with short words and long pauses. I wanted to see how everyone behaved when they believed I was still small and easy to move. Dr. Kumar visited often. He checked my reflexes, my eyes, my speech. One morning he said that I was doing better than the charts first suggested. He said my mind seemed clear, and that with rehab, I might regain more movement than expected. He talked about physical therapy, occupational therapy, maybe a walker at first. He said the brain could keep healing for months. I nodded and thanked him. He wrote something on the chart at the end of the bed. I could not see the words, but I knew it was important. A clear mind with a weak body is still a mind the law recognizes. Later that same day, I heard David's voice outside the room. He was talking in the hallway to someone whose tone I already knew. Calm, professional, full of careful words. Karen. She had my chart in her hand. I could hear the pages as she turned them. She said that Dr. Kumar believed I was mentally capable of understanding conversations and making decisions again. She mentioned the word competent. That word landed in my chest like a tool in a toolbox. David did not sound pleased. He asked if that meant I would have to sign every document myself. He asked what would happen if I refused to agree to the obvious choices for care. He used that phrase, obvious choices, as if locking Elena away somewhere was common sense. Karen told him that as long as I was competent, any long-term legal decisions would need my consent, or at least my input. She said that even if I became physically weaker, my voice still mattered if my mind was clear. David changed his tone then. He lowered his voice, but I could still hear enough. He asked her how guardianship worked, what it would look like if a doctor later said I was not capable. He asked how someone could become a legal decision-maker for elderly parents, how to get power of attorney, how long it took. He said it all in a smooth, tired voice, as if he were just trying to make sure paperwork matched reality. I heard something else under it, impatience, a hunger for control. Karen explained that guardianship was serious, that courts got involved, that existing documents like wills and older powers of attorney mattered. She suggested that before any of that, the family should meet with an elder law attorney and talk about wishes and plans. I heard the faint rustle of paper as she handed David some cards. He sighed and said he did not want things to get messy, that lawyers only made families fight. He said he just wanted to make the decisions quickly, for everyone's sake. That evening, Dr. Kumar came back alone. He told me, this time speaking directly to me, that he was pleased with my mental recovery. He said he was going to note in my chart that I could participate in decisions about my own care. He told me I needed to keep working, keep trying, keep focusing. I looked him in the eye and said slowly that I understood every word he had just said. I watched something shift in his face. From that moment on, he always spoke to me first and to David second. A few days later, the rehab team moved me from ICU to the rehab ward. The new room was less crowded, less full of machines, but still smelled of medicine and sweat. I shared the space with another older man who spent most of his time staring at the window. Nurses came to help me sit up, stand, take short walks with a walker. Each step hurt, but each step also reminded me that I had time left and a mind that still worked. I used that time to listen, to watch, to learn. One afternoon, when the therapist left me in a chair by the window, I saw a familiar figure in the hallway. Henry, my neighbor, stood near the door, hat in his hands, speaking quietly to a nurse. His face was lined with worry. When he stepped into the room, his eyes filled with relief at seeing me upright. He said I looked better than he expected. His voice trembled a little when he called me stubborn in that warm way only an old friend can. After a while, with permission from the nurse and a wheelchair, he pushed me down the corridor into the elevator and out to a small cafe across the street. The air outside felt sharp and fresh after the heavy hospital smell. We sat at a corner table. Henry bought coffee in a soft roll, cut it in half, and handed me a piece. The cup was warm in my hand. For a moment, it felt like any other day in our old lives, just two old men having a break. Then I told him what I had heard. I spoke slowly, sometimes stopping to find words, but I told him everything. The talk about timelines, the nursing home brochure, the plan to send Elena away after I died, the questions about guardianship and control. Henry's jaw tightened. He shook his head and said he always thought David was a little too modern, but he did not expect this. I asked Henry if Elena had said anything to him lately. He looked down at his cup and then told me that she had come to his house twice in the last week just to talk. He said she had asked him if he thought she was losing her mind. She had said David treated her like a child, that he spoke slowly to her, as if she could not understand normal words. She had said she was scared of being alone in our house if I did not come home. Henry admitted that he had tried to calm her, but he saw now that she had good reason to be afraid. Sitting there in that cafe, with traffic passing and a cheap clock ticking on the wall, I felt something settle inside me. The sadness was still there, but under it there was now a clear, solid core. I told Henry that I loved my son, but that I could not trust him with our future. I said that if I left things in his hands, he would lock Elena into a place she never chose and sleep well at night, calling it care. Henry did not argue. He just nodded and said that sometimes blood did not mean what people thought it meant. When he pushed me back to the hospital, the building looked different to me. It was no longer just a place where my body might heal. It was also a stage where everyone's true roles had been revealed. I was not going to wait for the family meeting and hope for the best. I had to plan, and I had to do it quietly. Back in my rehab room, a nurse met us at the door and thanked Henry for the visit. She handed me a clear plastic bag with some of my personal items. She said they had been locked away when I first came in, and that now that I was in rehab, I could have them again. Inside the bag, I saw my wallet, my keys, my old phone, and a worn leather folder I had almost forgotten. Later, when I was alone, I placed the bag on the little rolling table and opened it slowly. My fingers felt clumsy, but they worked. I pulled out the folder and laid it flat. The leather was cracked from years of use. On the front, in my own handwriting, I saw the words I had written long ago. House, deed, and will. Tucked into the side pocket of the folder, a white rectangle peeked out. I slid it halfway free and saw the name and number of an attorney I had visited years before, after paying off the house. Her name, Linda Greene, looked back at me in clear black ink. I stared at the folder and the card, my hand resting on them, and the beeping of the heart monitor slowed into a calm, steady rhythm as a very simple idea began to form. The next morning, the nurse helped me sit up in bed, and my legs shook with effort, but my mind felt calm. The leather folder lay on the little table by the window, its edges worn smooth by years in a drawer. I kept glancing at it while the nurse checked my blood pressure and asked how I felt. I answered that I was tired, but better. That was true. Better did not mean safe. When she left, I pulled the table closer and opened the folder again, this time with more care. Inside were papers I had signed long before this hospital room, back when my hands were steady and my hair was darker. I could not read every line from the bed, but I saw enough to remember. There was the paper from when we paid off the house. Another from when I met with a lawyer to write a simple will years ago after a neighbor died without one and left chaos behind. There were notes I had made in my own hand, little reminders to update later that I had never followed. The business card from Linda Greene still had a faint coffee stain in one corner. Looking at those things, I understood that my son's plan depended on me doing nothing. It depended on me staying still, letting old papers gather dust, letting the hospital and the system treat David as the default decision-maker. If I changed nothing, the line from this bed to the nursing home brochure was straight and short. If I moved, even a little, the lines could shift. I knew now that the law saw me as competent. That word I had heard in the hallway was not just a comfort, it was a tool. Later that day, Dr. Kumar came in during a quiet hour. He told me that the rehab team thought I could go home soon with some support. He listed services, visits, exercises. He asked if I felt ready. I told him slowly that I wanted to try. I also asked very clearly if he believed I understood what was happening around me. He looked at me for a long moment and said yes. He said he had already written in my record that I could make my own choices. I thanked him. He probably thought I was thanking him for his care. I was also thanking him for that one line in my chart. A few days later, they wheeled me out of the hospital. Henry came to drive me home because David was caught up at work. Elena waited in the small entry hall of the rehab unit with her hands knotted together, face pale with worry. When she saw me in the chair, she started to cry and laugh at the same time. She kept saying I looked strong, even though I knew I did not. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. Her fingers were thin and stiff, but they squeezed back. The drive home felt strange. The city I knew well slipped by the window like a film. Henry tried to fill the silence with stories about our street, about a new neighbor, about a stray cat that had adopted our porch. Elena wiped her eyes and nodded, but her gaze kept returning to me like she was checking that I was really there and not a dream. I watched the houses and thought about which one of them held a son who could talk about his parents like luggage that needed to be stored. When we turned onto our street and I saw our house, my chest tightened. The paint was faded in places, the fence leaned a little, but it was still ours. Henry helped me out of the car and up the short path. The air smelled like old leaves and cooking from a neighbor's kitchen. Standing in front of the door, I made a quiet promise to myself. No one would drag Elena out of this place and into a facility while I could still sign my name. Inside, everything looked the same and a little different. The same curtains, the same old couch, the same family photos, but now I saw them through the eyes of someone whose son already imagined them gone. Elena fussed over me, bringing pillows, water, a blanket. She apologized because the house was not as clean as she liked. She said her hands had hurt and she moved too slow. I told her it was perfect because it was still our place. That answer seemed to steady her. When she went to the kitchen to make tea, I asked Henry to help me to the table. I took the leather folder from my bag and laid it on the wood. Henry raised his eyebrows. He asked if it was time to deal with those old things. I told him that if I did not deal with them now, someone else would deal with us later. Then I showed him the lawyer's card. He nodded slowly and said he could drive me there whenever I was ready. The next morning, he did exactly that. Elena thought we were going to a routine checkup. That was not a lie. It was a checkup, just not for my blood. Henry helped me into his car again and drove across town to a quiet street with older office buildings. The sign on one of the doors said Linda Greene, attorney at law, exactly as it had years ago. Inside, the office smelled of paper and coffee. Shelves lined the walls, full of thick files. A plant sat in one corner, drooping a little but still alive. Linda came out from behind a desk, looking older but with the same sharp eyes. At first, she spoke to me like she would to any older man after a stroke, slow and careful. I listened, then spoke back with deliberate clarity. I told her I remembered coming to see her after we paid off the house. I told her I still had every paper she gave me. Then I told her what I had heard in the hospital. I told her about the nursing home plans, the talk of guardianship, the way my son talked about Elena like an object to place somewhere. I did not cry or raise my voice. I laid out the facts one by one. She listened without interrupting, except to ask simple questions about dates, names, and what documents I still had. I told her about the folder and placed it on her desk. She opened it and flipped through the pages. She said that some of the papers were old but still useful. She said others needed to be updated. She explained in plain language that as long as I was mentally competent, I could make changes. I could decide who made decisions for me and Elena. I could decide who inherited what. I could decide whether anyone had the right to place Elena anywhere. She did not tell me what to do. She laid out paths. She said words like, "You may want to consider," and one option would be. We did not write any new documents that day. She said it was better to move in steps, to gather full information first. She suggested I check my accounts, my property records, any existing powers of attorney. She offered to request my medical notes to confirm my competence on paper, not just in her opinion. When I stood to leave, she looked me in the eye and said that many elders never get the chance I had been given. She said most people do not wake from a coma in time to change the ending. From her office, Henry drove me to the bank. Miguel, the branch manager, greeted me with surprise and then with concern. He asked about my health and said it was good to see me upright. We sat in his small office while he pulled up my accounts on his screen. I asked him to explain how my accounts were titled, who the beneficiaries were, whether anyone else had easy access. He answered each question carefully, pointing to numbers and names. I did not move any money that day. I only listened and asked. I noted which accounts were joint with Elena and which ones named David anywhere. I asked Miguel, in general terms, what happened if an older person decided to simplify their accounts to make things easier for a spouse. He said the bank saw that all the time. He said it was better to do it while the person was still able to sign in front of a clerk. By the time Henry brought me home, I was exhausted. My legs hurt, my back ached, my head felt heavy. Elena helped me to the couch and tucked a blanket around my knees. She asked if I was sure I should be doing so much so soon. I told her that if I waited, other people would do even more with our lives, and we might not like it. She looked confused, but she did not push. That evening, when the house was quiet and the television murmured in the background, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up with stiff fingers and saw Karen's name on the screen. Her voicemail said that David had requested a formal family care meeting for the following week at a lawyer's office to discuss my future and Elena's long-term placement, and she wanted to confirm that I felt well enough to attend. The voicemail from Karen waited on my phone all evening, while the television muttered in the background and Elena moved slowly around the kitchen. When I finally played it again, I listened more carefully. She explained that David had asked for a formal family care meeting at a lawyer's office the following week to discuss my future and Elena's long-term care. She asked if I felt strong enough to attend and said she wanted everyone to be heard. Her voice was gentle, but I heard the shape of the plan behind it. My son wanted a table, a lawyer, and a social worker, so he could present his decisions as if they were pure common sense. If I walked into that room with nothing prepared, I would be fighting with bare hands against his neat arguments and his idea of being the responsible adult. I called her back the next morning when the house was quiet. I thanked her for caring and told her slowly that I did feel strong enough to attend. I also asked which lawyer's office it would be. She said David had asked for a general elder law firm near his house, but that nothing was fixed yet. I told her that I had an attorney I trusted and that, if possible, I would prefer to meet there. She paused, then said that if everyone agreed, that would be fine. She suggested I speak with David. I told her I would handle it. When I hung up, I did not call my son. I called Linda Greene. Her assistant answered and put me through. Linda listened as I explained about the proposed family meeting. I told her David wanted to talk about nursing home placement and guardianship. I also told her that Karen had suggested using a lawyer's office as neutral ground. Linda said that if I wished, her conference room could be that place. She reminded me that as long as I was competent, I had the right to choose my own counsel. She suggested that she send a polite message to Karen, offering her office for the meeting. I agreed. She said she would phrase it in neutral language, simply saying that she had been my attorney for some time and that it might help to have someone who knew my history. Over the next days, things began to move quietly. Linda called again and said the meeting date was confirmed at her office. She told me that on paper, it would be a discussion about my discharge plan and Elena's support. In reality, it would be the stage where David expected to be handed the keys to our lives. I told her that by the time he sat in her conference room, there would be very little left for him to hold. I did not say that with anger, only with a tired kind of certainty. We had work to do before then. Linda scheduled another appointment for me and Elena. This time she asked that Elena come as well, not just as a shadow, but as a person whose name was on everything with mine. Henry drove us again. Elena thought we were going to see a doctor. That was not a complete lie. Lawyers and doctors both deal with how lives end up. In the office, Linda spoke gently to Elena, asking about her wishes. Elena said she wanted to stay with me as long as possible, that she was afraid of being alone in a strange place. She said she did not want to be put somewhere, using the same phrase Lily had used. Linda listened and wrote notes. She did not push complicated terms. She asked simple questions. Did Elena trust me to make decisions with her? Did she want David to have full control? Did she want other options? Elena said she trusted me and did not want to be a burden on David's family if that meant being pushed aside. After that conversation, Linda laid out a series of forms on her desk. She did not explain them in legal detail to us. She said they were updates, corrections, ways to make sure that what we wanted in our hearts matched what was written in our papers. She asked if we understood that we were choosing to keep control between us and not hand it over to someone else. We both said yes. My hand shook as I signed each page, but the line of my name was still clear. Elena signed where Linda pointed, pressing the pen hard like she was digging her will into the paper. Linda gathered everything into neat stacks, clipped them, and set them aside to be filed. She said she would take care of the rest. After we left her office, Henry drove us to a low, gray building that looked like any other government place. Inside, the air was dry, the chairs were hard, and a bored clerk sat behind a glass window. Linda met us there briefly and guided us to a desk where a notary waited. There were more signatures, stamps, and small metal seals pressed into paper. No one in that room knew the full story. To them, we were just another older couple updating things while they still could. When it was done, Linda told us we were finished for the day and that the next steps would happen mostly on her side and at the bank. The following week, we went to the bank again. This time, Miguel's expression was more serious. He closed his office door and pulled up more screens. Linda had already spoken to him, so he knew we were simplifying and moving things to make life easier for us. He talked us through each account in careful, patient language. He asked us to confirm what we wanted. Some accounts were closed, others were combined. New ones were opened with slightly different labels. We did not need to know every technical detail. We just needed to know that what we had built over 40 years would go where we chose, on terms we understood. Miguel printed a few summaries and slipped them into envelopes. He said the rest would be mailed or kept in their system. He told us that many elders waited too long to make changes and then left everything to confuse children and courts. He said, almost under his breath, that it was good to see someone do it early. In the middle of all this, we also began to visit places that had nothing to do with banks or lawyers. Linda had suggested that if we truly wanted a new start, We should think about where we wish to spend our last years while we were still strong enough to move. Elena and I had always talked about warmer places when winter made our joints ache. It had been a fantasy, something to laugh about when the heating bill arrived. Now it became a quiet plan. Henry drove us to a small travel clinic where a tired nurse explained vaccinations and medicine for older travelers. She asked where we might go. We gave a general region, a sunny place with calmer winters and a slower rhythm. She nodded and circled things on a chart. There were shots, papers, small booklets. After that, we went to a passport office. Our old passports were dusty and close to expiring. A clerk in a blue vest took our pictures again, told us not to smile too much, and collected fees. She asked if we had big plans. Elena said we were thinking about one last long trip, while we still could. The clerk smiled and wished us a good journey, as if we were just another pair of tourists. At home, our living room slowly changed. Shelves that had been full of small things grew empty. Drawers that once held piles of clothes and papers now held only what we needed. We packed one suitcase at a time. I told Elena we were preparing for our long trip. She asked about David. I told her that he would be told in a way he understood, through offices, not living rooms. She looked uneasy, but trusted me. We sorted old photos, keeping some, leaving others in boxes. We labeled a few things for donation and a few for Henry to watch over. One morning, a small sign appeared in our yard. It was not large, just a simple board with a phone number and the word that had once been unthinkable to us, for sale. We had talked with Linda and Miguel. We had listened to their explanations. We knew that the house, as much as we loved it, was now more valuable as freedom than as walls. Elena stood at the window for a long time, watching a stranger hammer the sign into the ground. She whispered that she never thought she would see that day. I told her that the house had done its job. It had sheltered us and raised our son. Now it would give us one last gift if we let it go. The sale process moved faster than I expected. Linda and Miguel handled most of the details. People walked through our rooms, looking, measuring, imagining their own lives in the spaces where ours had played out. We stayed out of the way when we could. Papers were signed, calls were made, and one afternoon Linda phoned to say that everything was final. She did not list each step. She just said that what needed to be done was done, and that the money was where it needed to be for the next part of our life. In the middle of all this, David's calls became more frequent. He complained that I was hard to reach, that we were making things complicated. He reminded me of the upcoming family meeting at the lawyer's office. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor by arranging it. I kept my answers short. I told him I would be there in spirit, and that my lawyer would explain everything. He thought I meant I would be tired and let her talk. He had no idea I meant something else entirely. The night before our flight, Henry came over with his old car and a thermos of coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the suitcases lined up by the door. The house felt strangely empty and full at the same time. Elena moved from room to room, touching walls, straightening pictures that would soon belong to someone else. Henry asked if I was sure. I told him that for the first time in months, I felt sure about something. If we stayed, we would be slowly pushed into shapes that fit other people's plans. If we left now, we would live by choices written in our own hands. Early the next morning, before the sun was fully up, Henry loaded our luggage into the trunk. Lena walked carefully down the front steps, pausing to look back at the house. I took one last breath of the air in our yard, the smell of damp grass and old paint. As we drove away, I saw the for sale sign now marked with a smaller note. The kind agents hang when deals are done. I did not need to read the words. I knew what they meant. The drive to the airport was quiet. Traffic was light. Elena held my hand, our fingers knotted together between our seats. When we entered the bright, echoing hall of the departure terminal, everything felt huge and loud. People rushed by with rolling bags, children cried, announcements echoed in the air. Henry found us a bench near the check-in counters. He hugged us both longer than usual and then left, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand as he walked away. Elena and I moved slowly toward the airline desk. An agent checked our passports, weighed our bags, and handed us boarding passes. She asked the usual questions about luggage and security. To her, we were just another older couple going on a trip. Behind us, the line grew and shrank. Ahead of us, the wide hall opened toward security. As we stepped aside to put our documents back in my pocket, a loud chime sounded overhead, and a clear voice announced the start of boarding for our flight. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated in my jacket. When I looked at the screen, there was a short message from Linda saying that the family care meeting with David had been confirmed in her conference room for the end of the week, and I slid the phone back into my pocket as we turned toward the security line with our boarding passes in hand. The day of the family meeting at Linda's office, Elena and I were already far from our street. Our house belonged to someone else. Our keys were gone, and everything that mattered now fit inside 2 suitcases and a few folders in my carry-on bag. We sat in a bright airport lounge between flights. Our plane delayed just enough to give Linda the window she needed. Outside the wide glass windows, planes moved slowly on the gray runway. Inside, people rushed, laughed, argued, slept. Elena sat beside me, her hands around a paper cup of tea, watching people instead of thinking too much about where we had come from. My phone lay on the table in front of us, screen dark, airplane mode still on. For a moment, it was peaceful. No calls, no messages, no pressure. Just the low murmur of travelers and the soft wind of the air vents. I had already agreed with Linda what would happen. She would host the meeting in her conference room. David would arrive, expecting to discuss my care, Elena's placement, and his role as our responsible son. Karen would be there, or at least on a speakerphone. Linda would explain the legal picture step by step. She would not shout, threaten, or insult anyone. She would simply put the papers on the table and show David what I had already done. If the timing worked, I would join by video from wherever I was. I did not know if the connection would be perfect. I did know that even if the call failed, the documents would still sit in front of him. Paper does not care about signal strength. An hour before the meeting, I turned my phone back on. It woke up like a dog smelling rain. Messages poured in, most of them from David, some from Rachel, a few from numbers I did not recognize. And I did not open them. I let them stack up behind the small icons. Then a different notification appeared, a simple reminder. Call with Linda. Confirmed. I tapped it. The phone rang only once before she answered. Her voice sounded the same as always, calm, low, in control. She told me that David and Rachel were already in her conference room. Karen was there too, seated near the end of the table with her folder. She said David looked impatient, Rachel looked annoyed, and Karen looked tired. She asked if I was ready. I told her I was. She suggested we start with audio only and then switch to video when the time was right. That was fine with me. I placed the phone on the table, angled so the camera would later see both me and Elena. Elena watched my hands and nodded, even though I had explained all this to her already. She knew the broad strokes. We were safe, our money and choices were in our own hands, and today David would find out that he could not move us like pieces on his board anymore. Linda put me on mute for a few minutes while she opened the meeting. I listened to the faint sounds through the speaker. Chairs sliding, papers rustling, someone clearing their throat. She began with basic things. She introduced herself to Karen and confirmed that she had been my attorney for many years. She said the purpose of the meeting was to discuss my long-term care, Elena's situation, and the legal structure now in place. I heard David's voice cut in a few times, pressing to get to the point. I heard Rachel say something about having limited time. Karen stayed polite, suggesting that everyone listen first. Then Linda said she had a surprise. She explained that I was well enough and willing to join them by phone from a different location, and that it was important they hear my voice directly. She unmuted me and asked if I could speak. I said yes. My voice sounded small through the phone, but steady. I greeted them all by name. I heard silence on the other end, just for a beat. Then David said my name in a tight voice and asked where I was. I answered that I was traveling with Elena and that the details did not matter for the legal discussion. I said the important thing was that my mind was clear and that I had already made my decisions. That did not satisfy him, but Linda cut in and said we would get to locations later if needed. She began with the house. She told them that some months earlier she had helped me and Elena sell it. She explained that the sale had been legal, voluntary, and properly recorded. She said the property no longer belonged to us and would not be part of any future estate that David might hope to manage. I heard Rachel's sharp intake of breath. She asked how that could happen without them knowing. Linda said simply that competent adults do not need their children's permission to sell their own home. She added that David had never been on the deed. Next, she spoke about the will. She said that many years ago I had written a simple document that left everything to Elena first and then to David. She said that after my stroke, once my mental competence was confirmed by medical notes, I had updated that will. She explained that the new version placed Elena's care and support at the center. A portion of our savings was now in a structure that would support her and me in our new life, wherever that might be. The remainder, after certain costs, would not automatically flow to David. Instead, it was directed to a trust that would support charitable causes and, if anything remained later, our granddaughter's education under strict conditions. She mentioned that David would receive a small fixed sum, enough to show he was not ignored, but not enough to treat us like a bank. David's voice rose then. He said this could not be right. He said it must have been done under pressure, that I must have been confused. He reminded Linda that I had been in ICU and rehab. He suggested that someone must have taken advantage of me. Linda did not sound offended. She simply said that before any changes, she had obtained and reviewed my medical evaluations. She read from them, not every word, just the important parts. Dates, signatures, notes from Dr. Kumar and others, stating that I was mentally alert and able to understand decisions. She said that, in fact, it was David who had asked about guardianship before any doctor mentioned confusion. There was a pause while that sank in. Then Linda spoke about powers of attorney. She explained that any old paper which might have given David the right to sign for us had been revoked while I was fully competent. New documents named Elena and me as each other's primary decision-makers, with a neutral professional as backup, not a family member with a conflict of interest. She said that if David tried to use any old documents, they would be considered invalid. She said this slowly, so there would be no mistake. After that came the bank. She opened a folder, and I could almost hear the slide of glossy pages across the table. She said that under Miguel's guidance, our accounts had been consolidated and moved into forms designed to support us, not to feed someone else's plans. She confirmed that David was not listed as an owner on any main account. She made it clear that if we died tomorrow, the path our money would follow had already been chosen by us, not by a court, not by our son's wishes. Rachel tried to argue then. She said that in many families, the children took over for aging parents, and that it was normal for them to make choices about care and money. Linda agreed that support was normal, but control was different. She said that in this case, David had spoken openly about wanting to place Elena in a facility as soon as I was gone, and had already asked about becoming our guardian. She said that, as a lawyer who had seen many such cases, she believed it was safer for us to keep distance from that kind of power. Karen cleared her throat softly and confirmed that David had indeed asked detailed questions about guardianship, long-term placement, and how to make decisions without too much pushback from us. Up to that point, I had been just a voice on the table. Linda then asked if I was ready to turn on the camera. I said yes. I tapped the button. After a moment, her conference room appeared on my screen. A long table, pale walls, folders stacked neatly, fluorescent lights buzzing softly. I saw David and Rachel sitting together, both tense. Karen sat near the end, her hands folded on a notebook. Linda sat closest to the camera, glasses low on her nose, watching everyone. On their side, they saw Elena and me in the bright airport lounge, a window behind us showing a gray sky and the tail of a plane. Elena lifted her hand in a small wave. I told them, as simply as I could, that I had heard everything in the hospital when they thought I was gone. I said I had heard David talk about timelines, costs, and what would happen when I go. I said I had heard Rachel talk about not wanting the house turned into a sick room, about her fear of medical equipment in her photos. I reminded them of their words about Elena, not as their mother and mother-in-law, but as a problem to store somewhere with bingo and nurses. I spoke without shouting, without adding adjectives. I just repeated their own ideas in plain language. David said I was exaggerating. He said I had misunderstood. He said he was trying to be realistic. I answered that I did not doubt he believed that. I said that was exactly why I could not give him control. A person who believes that kindness and prison are the same thing for old people is too dangerous with power. I told him that I had chosen not to fight him in our living room, not to throw accusations or tears at him. I had chosen instead to let the systems he respected speak for me. Deeds, wills, bank records, and travel documents. I told him that Elena and I had sold our house by our own choice. I told him that our money now served our life together, not his safety net. I told him that he would not be able to sign us into any facility without a hard legal fight, and that if he tried, he would find that every paper he thought was lying still in a drawer had already moved. I said I did not do this to hurt him. I did it because I loved my wife and had promised her, years ago, that she would never be left alone in some corridor under fluorescent lights unless she wanted to be there. Rachel asked where we were going, her voice thin with anger. I said we were traveling to a warmer place we had always talked about, that we had enough to live simply and quietly there. I said I had no plan to ask them for help, no plan to drag them into our future. Karen asked gently if we wanted to cut off contact completely. I said I was not locking any doors. I said that if David ever wanted to talk like a son, not a manager, he could try. But I added that there would never be another day when he could talk about us as burdens in front of nurses and expect nothing to change. Linda closed her folder then. She summarized the situation one last time. She said that my choices were valid and supported by law and medical reports. She told David that if he wished to challenge them, he would need to hire his own attorney and explain why a court should ignore a competent man's written decisions. She did not sound worried about his chances. She reminded him that no one had accused him of a crime. He was free to live his life as he wished. He just no longer had control over ours. For a long moment, no one spoke. In the silence, I watched David's face. He did not cry. He did not break down. He simply looked like a man who had expected a door to open and found a wall of glass instead. He could still see what he wanted, but he could not touch it. Rachel looked down at the table, jaw tight, her hands clenched. Karen's eyes were sad, but there was no surprise in them. Linda waited, pen in hand, patient as stone. I felt Elena squeeze my arm. Our boarding announcement echoed faintly over our heads in the lounge. The voice from the speakers called our names along with others, inviting us to the gate. I told Linda I had to go. I thanked her for doing what she did best, turning quiet wishes into solid lines on paper. I told David that I hoped, for his sake, he would learn the difference between caring for someone and managing them like a project. I ended the call before he could answer. The screen went black, showing only my reflection for a second. I put the phone face down on the small table between us. Elena stood slowly, took her bag, and held out her hand. I took it. Around us, travelers began to move toward the open gate. Somewhere across the ocean, in a conference room that now felt very far away, my son sat in front of a stack of documents that told him exactly how little control he now had. I did not see his final reaction. I did not need to. I turned toward the gate with Elena at my side, walking as far as my recovering legs would take me, and let the sound of the boarding call drown out whatever might still be ringing in his ears.